Hey, everybody, and welcome to another exciting training that I think is going to be very, very useful. Before we get into it, can I ask you for a little favor? If you've been getting good value from these tips and career strategies that I've been sharing, please take a moment, share the video, leave a comment, let me know of your experience as well. Every little bit really helps get the word out, and my mission is to help as many people as I possibly can really stand up for themselves and get that next sort of level in their career. It's possible, it's doable, and I really believe strongly that anyone can do that. So please do that if you're getting some value here. But the topic of today that I really want to jump into, this is something that no matter where you're at in your career right now, you need to know how to do this. This is all about addressing the biggest elephant in the room, which is how do I get over having been either recently laid off or laid off over the last couple of years and it's in my resume? How do I address with that? What do I do there? It is a huge worry. It is a huge source of anxiety, especially for the people that I work with. And by the way, I'm talking from executives on down. It doesn't matter how senior you are or how much money you make or how amazing your prospects are overall. When you have that, it's like this negative anchor that's pulling you down. And whether it's rational or not, whether it really is as big of a deal as you think or it's not, it's weighing on you. And that weight is sucking out a lot of the energy of your career development efforts and where you go next. I know what that's like. And for a job seeker, a lot of times, it's about a layoff, but it can affect any other part of your life. I remember when I was really young, in my early 20s, I didn't want to think about money. And so I was insecure about it. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to make more of it. I wasn't willing to study it, so I just ignored it. And that is never a good strategy. For me, that ended up with me racking up my credit card bills and having to turn that whole debt ship around that wouldn't have even been created if I had been willing to look at the situation in the face. And so the first thing I got to tell you is if you have a layoff in your history, you got to make a commitment to looking at this thing in the face. You cannot wing this thing. You cannot just enter into the interview room and think that it's not going to be brought up. And if you think that winging it is going to help, that is just a recipe for them to draw the worst possible conclusions. And that means the worst possible outcomes for you. So before we go any further, make a strong, strong, strong commitment here that I'm going to look this in the face. I'm going to see exactly what I need to do, come up with a game plan, figure that game plan out, and execute it the same way every single time. You've got to do that. Got to do that. So let's say you've done that. You're on this journey with me. We're simpatico, and you want to figure out a way to solve this. Next step. Realize that a layoff really is not a scarlet letter. Okay, you're not going to be marked here or branded as damaged goods because you were laid off. Over 2 million people, Americans, lose their jobs every single month. 2 million. So that's over 24 million Americans every year are in transition against their will. And they all figure out, ways to get ahead. They all figure out ways to turn that, into an opportunity, turn that adversity into an opportunity. So just know that it's common. It may feel really weird to you, and maybe the circumstances behind the layoff were emotionally loaded, which is a separate thing, by the way. The circumstances of why you were laid off and what happened there are separate from how this is going to impact your job search. And that's something that people really forget, and they blur the lines to their detriment. So just realize it, okay? It's not a scarlet letter. You can neutralize this. You can bounce back from it, but it does require a game plan. So assuming you're with me here on these first two things, number one, you've made a commitment to look at this thing. We're going to deal with it. We're going to address it, and we're going to back it up with action. Number two, realize this is not a scarlet letter. This is a controllable, expected factor that pops up, and you can minimize it. Now, here's where we're going to jump on the highway and skip 10 plus steps. in terms of preparing for this and getting to the other side. Because a lot of people at this point will be like, all right, we got to do some psychological work and we got to dig deep and find the underlying motivations. Got to do the inner work to get good with it. And I agree, all of that stuff is really good. But I'm actually just going to skip right to the end and give you some answers that you can use depending on why you were laid off. And I'm going to show you some answers that are going to be perfect at spinning this and responding in a way that doesn't turn it into a negative. I have found through analysis and experience with clients that layoffs generally fall into a couple of major buckets. There's a disruption in your career track or the responsibilities in your current job. There is a disruption in the culture. In other words, the culture changes or becomes so much more toxic that you got to get the hell out of there. There's a further education piece, in other words, leaving to attend further schooling or training. There are deep internal conflicts, and that's when there's a lot of messiness, and it's not all one or the other, but it just gets to a point where you got to get out for your own safety, for your own peace of mind, whatever that is. So depending on these buckets, what I would like you to do is think about which bucket most closely resembles the circumstances behind why I was laid off. And then I want you to use a variation of the answer that I'm going to give you. In other words, this is a cheat sheet. I'm going to give you a templatized answer that you can tweak and use in every single interview. So let's talk a little bit about if your career track or your responsibilities change. A sample answer, and there's going to be a link at the bottom of this video that's going to give you each of these scripts that you can use, and I strongly recommend that you copy and paste those and have them and you use them. But let's say that your career track or your responsibilities change. A great way to answer that is to frame it along the lines of, I really loved working at whatever the name of your previous employer was, and specifically tackling this major responsibility. Let's say it's building strategic alliances, building client relationships, executing lean process improvements. You're going to plug that in. That's your major thing. A little over a year ago, a new management team, whatever, was brought in, and the focus of my department, the focus of my responsibilities changed. While it didn't affect my performance, I ultimately decided to leave so that I could find a position that better suited my strengths. Based on what I've learned so far, this role seems like a very, very good fit for that. So that's how you handle a mismatch or a change in your responsibilities that spurred the layoff. Here's another one, culture mismatch. A new so-and-so was installed, a boss of yours, a superior, department head. And as a result of the changes that they implemented, the in-house culture and priorities changed significantly. I no longer felt that my priorities and those of the company were in sync. So with regret, I made a decision that it was going to be better for all concerned that I move on. I don't foresee this being an issue here, though, because X, Y, and Z. Do you see a common pattern here? You're going to answer it. You're not going to delve into the negative, and then you're going to spin it back to them and say how the thing that didn't work here, that served to teach you that this particular opportunity is going to be way better, the black and the white here. You're always going to spin it into that positive. Here's a way that you can answer further education, assuming you left your job to get a degree or training and now you're re-entering. I knew that degree or training name, say executive MBA, getting an executive MBA was essential to realizing my career goals. And I thought about it and I ran the numbers and I came to the conclusion that there's no way that I could realistically pursue that training and execute my full-time responsibilities at the level that was demanded. So based on that, I made a decision to leave, dive all in on the training, and now I feel totally empowered to use that towards the next stage of my career. And based on what we've been discussing, this seems like an excellent opportunity to leverage all of this. Finally, internal conflicts. These are the really complicated ones. These are the ones that don't fall into the neat and clean buckets. A lot of times, it can happen. Maybe there's some deep-seated personality issues. Maybe there's malfeasance in the company that you don't want to talk about, but that's what ultimately prompted it. There can be a lot of stuff, a lot of messy stuff that can't go into that neat bucket. So for that, I want to give you two possible answers that you can use that should cover it. Again, you don't want to go so far into explaining this stuff that it becomes a huge thing about the negatives. There's no way that that's going to help you. No matter how much rapport you feel, there's no way that an extensive discussion about that stuff is going to help. So here are two possible answers that you can use. Again, refer to the cheat sheet link that is attached to this video to actually get these, copy and paste them. It's about using them, really. That's where you're going to get the benefit here, not just listening to me talk about it. So here's some two answers. Our company has been suffering with whatever the issue was that you left, let's say low morale or high turnover for quite some time. And I began to understand that the systemic issues behind it were more than I could overcome. This is why I feel like this position would be an excellent match, etc., etc. In other words, you're admitting it. Here's the major issue. Big culture issue, big turnover issue, whatever it is. Here it is. And I fought it, and I wasn't able to defeat that on my own. And I couldn't keep burning up that energy to deal with that level of dysfunction. So that's why I feel this job is going to be a much better fit. And finally, here's another one. As rewarding as working at your previous employer was, I felt disappointed by the lack of opportunities for career growth. I wanted to change that. That's something that I take very, very seriously. Based on what we've been talking about, I feel like this position would allow me to do that and have that. So these are some of the major ways that you can answer this. And if you stick to that, you stick to the strategy here. Short, tight answers, address, control, flip it back. You're going to be fine. But what trips people up is, number one, they have not taken the time to identify their answer. You have one answer for this. But also, they don't practice it. And you got to practice, practice, practice. You got to practice this so much that it becomes like second nature. When I was a film and TV actor, and when I was doing plays as well, I would often have dozens and dozens of pages of dialogue to learn. And the way actors learn that stuff is, you learn these huge chunks of text by rote. There's no emotion involved in it. There's nothing. You're not thinking about the scene. You're just doing it. You're just going over A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You're running the lines in the shower, while you're walking, while you're taking a jog, while you're biking, while you're putting the kids to bed. The lines are just running through. And that's what you should do for this. The best way to sap any weird emotions and halting and fumbling in the interview is to practice your answer until it is tight, 30 seconds, until it comes at the drop of a hat, and that you don't need to be in any kind of emotional state to just bust out the answer. So I would use a voice memo app. A lot of smartphones will have it. You can use a voice recorder, digital voice recorder as well, and record them. Record your answers. See how you're honestly coming across, and practice, 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 practice. I'm talking dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times until this answer is just in your back pocket, ready to be pulled out at a moment's notice. And then I would start practicing it on what I call friendlies, whether it's friends, family, peers, people who have your back and ideally are going to be honest with you. Run the answer by them and ask them, what do you think? Is that confident? Does that do a good job of answering that question and not keeping it negative? If so, you're in. You're good. That's my suggested track here. This is a way to get to an answer. It's a way to get to an answer that's been proven to work. Don't reinvent the wheel here. Use something that works. Practice it until you are so sick of it that if you ever hear it again, you're going to lose it. That's what you want to do. Choose, practice, 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 practice. Have it in your back pocket, and then just go in there. Just make sure that you're positive. Make sure that it's friendly. Make sure that you see the larger context here, because it's not about the fact that you were fired. There are blips and there are hard parts in all of our lives. You got to see that the new opportunities would not happen if you weren't blessed by this kind of adversity. And if you're not yet at that point, and this is my closing thought here, if you're not yet at a point where you can see that, where you have come across and you're not feeling as raw about it, if you're not there yet, then I would seriously consider not ramping up the search. Because if the emotions are there and you haven't dealt with it, they are going to come out, and they're going to come out in ways that you're not going to be very pleased with, and that could conceivably tank a really good opportunity. So come to terms with it first, then execute the strategy, and you're going to be just fine. Thank you guys so much. If you have not done it yet, please visit upgradeyourjob.com, where you can join my private list. You'll get once a week updates straight from my desk on ways to master the job search, stay confident, land a higher paying job, and you'll get instant access to my 6-point checklist for landing a 6-figure job. Thank you guys so much. I will talk to you soon.